Okay, guys. So good afternoon, everyone. For some of you, I should say good morning because you're in the US, or good evening because I saw a few familiar faces from Asia, where I spend quite a lot of time. So thanks very much for joining us today to kickstart the year and a birth series of events on future of packaging. Basically, the future of packaging branding is cover all the topics on packaging and branding, from new material, sustainability in packaging and brands, new consumer behavior, innovation. So first of all, let me wish you on behalf of the Hubbers team and Hubbers community a very great year for you and for your family. I wish the year will be full of creativity, inspiring event, sustainable project, and hopefully much more. I see today a lot of old friends and new friends as well. I'm very happy to see you guys coming from all over the world. That is a Hubbers community, which is pretty much global. As just to let us know, would you mind, guys, to write in the chat which country you are coming from? So we will have a kind of panorama on who is here today. So before letting the mic, India, Germany, oh yes, Singapore, Cyprus, oh, we are traveling now. During COVID, it's always a nice feeling. Before letting the mic to Karen and Stergios, our two hosts of this inspiring series of events, that going to introduce David, the superstar of today. I will take 3 minutes to introduce what the Hubbers team has been working on the past few months for our community of creators, experts, and contributors in a sustainable product that can create a better tomorrow. So it will be a short intro. Let me find the sharing button. Can we see my screen?
Yes.
So basically, as some of you, most of you maybe knows, Hubbers is two things. Hubbers is first a community. It's a global community where we meet during events, online and in-person event. We basically support each other to create sustainable product. So we are three types, usually we have three types of members. We have the creative side, we have the expert side, and we have the contributors. And we all work together and share about what we do in the creative sphere. Hubbers is also, and that is very important, it's the tools we have been preparing for you and for all the community. It's a springboard to co-create sustainable product, brands, and service. So we created tools to crowdsource new design with our community. We have also a marketplace, expert marketplace, and I'm sure that a lot of you can participate. It will open in February. You can put your skills, you can hire a skill unit to launch your project. We have also a product launcher that is it's a help to know exactly where you are in your creation journey. And we will be working in 2022 in a suite of product development tools, which are like big project management tools for people creating product, mainly hardware products. So from February, we will have also a lot of new events coming up related to edge tech, 3D printing, a big one, a big series, and we want you guys to travel all around the world about digital nomad, and some also the possibility for people having great project to be able to pitch to investor and to expert and creator of the Hubbers community. So let's take a flight together.
Most certainly. We take it from here, Ben. Thanks for the introduction. So myself and Kier, some of you have seen us before. We spoke before. Kier, myself.
Sorry, Sturgis. I will just add one thing, which is very important. We have been talking with David. So last but not least, before Kier and Sturgis take over, we want to give all our participants a chance to win a copy of our speaker, David Gluckman book that shit will never sell. So you will have the possibility to participate in the giveaway. Thank you, guys. I leave the mic to our host.
Wonderful. Thanks, Ben, for the introduction. Thank you all for being here today. Happy New Year. Hopefully 2022 is going to be a happier, healthier, more productive and more prosperous year for all of us all over the globe. Thanks for being here again. Myself and Kier are responsible for running those packaging events for Habbers. We're part of the team. Kier, if you want to say hi to the audience.
Hi everybody. I'm based out of Portugal at the moment, originally from South Africa, so David and I have something in common. Lived and worked around the world in FMCG companies like Unilever, premium cosmetics like Estee Lauder, and I think the thing that's central to my career has been packaging and the role of packaging in selling products, and hence I'm very passionate about it and part of this team to bring packaging awareness and creativity to as many people as possible. So Sturgis, thanks. Over to you.
Thank you, Kier. As Ben explained at the beginning, packaging is a huge topic, so we aim to cover as many areas as we can in the coming months. So that could be anything from sustainability to technical innovation to packaging design, brand development, brand innovation. All those things and themes are key to packaging development. So today we're going to focus a little bit more on brand development and ideas generation. And we're very fortunate and very, very blessed to have David Gluckman with us today as our speaker. David has several decades of experience in developing new ideas, coming up with new ideas and developing those ideas. He has a prolific portfolio of brands in the drinks business, mostly in the alcoholics drinks business. And he has recently published a book that summarizes some of his great stories, throughout the decades, and how he's been an integral part of developing some of the world's best known brands. And so David is here today to talk us through some of his experiences. As you can imagine, there's a lot of experience there, so we only have 30 minutes. So David, it's a great pleasure to have you here with us today. And the floor is yours if you would like to share your screen and start with your presentation.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm speaking to you from cold, miserable London, but I'll try and bring some sunshine into your lives. As Sturgis indicated, I've been in the ideas business actually since the 1960s. Well, I probably worked on 1,000 projects of one kind or another for a variety of different companies. And I think I'm looking back, I have a very different view from many people about ideas. Looking back, I mean, I've coined the term inside the box thinking because it's a counter to people who develop a flavor of vodka and then strut around pretending to be Steve Jobs. It's not quite like that. And I'm going to take you through some stories and then tell you what I conclude about the whole business of having ideas. So let's begin without any further ado. I was born and educated in South Africa. I went into the advertising business after university. And remember, this is back in the 1950s, when it wasn't quite so fashionable as perhaps it is now. I came to the UK in 1961, continued in advertising. And then in 1969, I became a brand development specialist. And I've been working in that field ever since. And I'm still very much active today. And here is a group of some of the companies that I've worked for over that time. And I think two had the most influence over my career. The first one that I encountered when I came to England in the 60s was Proctor and Gamble. Very disciplined company, very formal company. But I think that my knowledge and experience from Procter and Gamble kept me honest throughout my career. And I think it taught me that I was in the business of selling products rather than dreams. So P&G instilled in me this feeling that you had to develop products that were competitive. And in that case, I was selling soap most of the time, so it wasn't particularly romantic. But the other experience I had also working in advertising was with the Irish Dairy Board. And the development, working in an ad agency, the Irish Dairy Board approached us and said, our product is not branded. Therefore, it's used as a bulk product for blending in things like own label butters. They said, we're looking to develop a brand in order to command a higher price. And the agency developed Kerrygold butter, which I think was regarded as one of the great successes of the 1960s. And although I was not a prime mover in this, but a junior operative, it had a strong impact on me because this wasn't a product exercise so much as trying to help an economy. Anyway, onward.
David, can I interrupt you there for a second? Can everybody see David's slides? I'm sorry to interrupt you, David. I'm really sorry. I need to make sure that everybody can. All right.
That's fine.
So apparently we have a bit of a problem here. David, people cannot see the slides. Would you mind
stop sharing?
Stop sharing and share again. See what happens.
Okay.
Oh, some people can see actually, which is strange. Let's try it again.
I think we can see it in one of the tile, but not in the main screen.
So what do you
Can you just share again, David, please?
Let's have a look. Hang on. Right. Okay. So I'll share again. Oh, there's some people out there. Hi.
Yeah, I think everybody can see it now.
Yeah.
I think everybody can see it now.
Okay, so that's where we were.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excellent.
And I just showed you the P&G and the Kerrygold slides. Well, in 1969, I started working in the brand development business, and I was incredibly lucky because I went to a conference in Straza on Lake Maggiore and met a guy from a company called IDV, which is an alcoholic beverage company. It was quite big. It was international. They had the distribution rights for Smirnoff vodka worldwide, except for the USA. They had craft ports and sherries. They had a wine portfolio. They had Gilbeys gin. J&B was the biggest selling Scotch whiskey in the US. These are all part of their brand portfolio. And I met a man at this conference, and following the conference, suggested that maybe we could do some work for him. And he said yes, and this was 1969. And I worked for the company from 1969 to 2005, which is 36 years. And I was always an outside consultant. I was never on the direct payroll. In 1997, they merged with Guinness UD to form Guinness UDV. And then they took over Seagram's later in that year. and became Diageo, which I think is now the world's largest branded drinks company. So I had 36 years of working for them, which was an amazing experience for an outside consultant. And we had sufficient success, I suppose, in the first couple of years to decide to break out on our own. So my partner and I, two people, and I was never much bigger than a two-person company, decided to set up on our own in Soho in London. And this was 1974 1973 in April. And the first brief we had came from the drinks company, and I called it the brief from hell because it was an incredibly difficult brief. First of all, we never met the client until the day we presented the idea to him. Secondly, there was no written brief at all. The only information we had was that the Irish government had decided to give a 10-year tax holiday to any companies that were developing brands primarily for export. So the consequences of this in financial terms were huge, but we knew nothing about the strengths and weaknesses of the company, the preferences in the company. So we had literally a blank sheet of paper, which can sometimes be very difficult, but in this case, fortunately, it became quite successful. I remember sitting in the office on a Monday morning and saying to my partner, what are we going to do about this Irish brief? And I said, is there anything in my experience and involvement with Kerrygold which might be brought to bear on this particular project? And he asked the question, he said, what happens if we mix Irish cream and Irish whiskey? So it was a Monday morning. We'd only been in business for a very short while. And I said to him, well, there's only one way to find out. So we went down to the local supermarket, bought some Irish whiskey. We then bought some Irish cream. We went back to the office full of excitement, mixed them together, tasted them. And the result was truly disgusting. So we were quite dispirited, but I felt there was something there. And I said, let's get back to the supermarket and try again. So we did, and looked around the shelves and found powdered drinking chocolate, Cadbury's powdered drinking chocolate. So went back to the office, added that, played around with some sugar, and eventually produced a liquid that looked like that. And that became the basis for our product. Now, there was nothing scientific, and if you'd asked me to indicate what the proportions of the various ingredients were, at the end of this mixture, I would not have had any idea. It was just a complete mix and match, taste and see what we liked. I called up the client and I said, look, I think I've got something really interesting. And here the most important moment of the whole thing happened. I jumped in a taxi, took it up to head office, gave it to the client. He tasted it and he said, that's fantastic. I think we should do it. And that was my first lesson, I think, in brand development, that no matter how clever you think you are, and no matter how successful you think your idea is that the guy at the other end is paying the money, and it's his decision that makes or breaks an idea. Anyway, he was very excited and enthusiastic. He said, we've got a brand now. We've got to turn this thing into a brand. I said, can you make it? He said, I'll get our technical people to try. So the next thing was to come up with a brand. And I think what was interesting here, and I think it's part of my thesis, is that once you're on a brand journey, it's a 24-hour-a-day job. You have to keep thinking about it. You have to go to sleep thinking about it. You have to wake up thinking about it. You have to look around wherever you go in the street thinking about it. And that's what happened here. We were moving office and we went along to look at our new premises. And if you look on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see 3 windows with white brick outline. That was our new office. And below it was a restaurant called Bailey's. And I was walking along and I saw this and I said to my partner, Bailey's, that's a perfect name for our product. Now, there's a long explanation of why we didn't choose names like O'Reilly's or Hannigan's, typical Irish names. I'll leave you to read that in my book or on the website. But Bailey's was the name, and I was convinced that Bailey's was perfect. And if you notice, if you look at Bailey's Irish Cream now, there's no apostrophe in the brand name. That's because there was no apostrophe in the restaurant. So Bailey's became the name. I've had it the client, he said, terrific, I love it. That's the very first Bailey's label that was ever produced. At the time, we called it Irish Cream Chocolate Liqueur. That's probably my favorite Bailey's label. It's now, I think, the biggest selling liqueur brand in the world. In last year, it did 7.8 million cases. It turned over $1.9 billion. It's about 40% of a market, which is worth about $4 or $5 billion. And the whole thing took about 45 minutes to get from the brief to the solution. So very gratifying. I'm now going to talk about the categories which where I learned a huge amount from P&G. And these were white spirits, very difficult categories in which to innovate. The company had Bombay Sapphire, but when the mergers took place in 1997, they were acquired by the Mergers and Acquisitions department in the UK to get rid of one of their gin brands. And Bombay Sapphire, which was much loved by the management of the company, was sold off for, I think, 561 million pounds. It was a very charismatic brand and a very attractive label. And the instruction which came down from the management was that we have to develop another brand to occupy this space. And I'm a great believer in functionally differentiated products. If you can find a reason why people should switch from Bombay to your particular brand, then you should look for it. And it took me back to something that a friend of mine once said to me many years ago. He said, to produce a cure, you need to invent a disease. And I think this is something that came from the cosmetics industry. And we looked at gin and said, how could we find a problem with gin and so that we can develop a solution? And the problem really came from remarks people had said to me, remarks I'd heard in focus groups, consumers talking, why don't you like gin? Because it has a bitter, harsh, dirty taste. So the solution was to develop a gin, the cleanest, freshest tasting gin made from fresh botanicals. And the idea we had was that most botanicals that go into gin, juniper, coriander, and other botanicals are dried. We produced one made from fresh botanicals, which was the first time. This was real sort of P&G thinking, I suppose, that the process that we would use would be fresh botanicals. The benefit, the payoff was the cleanest, freshest tasting gin you can buy. And the brand is called Tanqueray Ten. It's out there today. And if you try it, I think you'll see exactly what we mean. The other part of our objective, I think, was to try and bring in non-drinkers, people who were getting bored and tired with vodka. So that was one of the developments in that category. The second one was vodka is an incredibly difficult category because the law everywhere says to be classified as pure vodka, you have to be colorless, odorless, and flavorless. It's incredibly difficult from that point of view to create something, a new dimension in the market. But I think my thesis there is if you can find a word, you can build a brand. And we looked at all different spirits and found that one of the buzzwords in spirits was smooth, but it applied mainly to brown spirits like whiskey. And smooth really is people saying, well, I don't actually like the taste of whiskey, so the blander it is, the smoother it is, the more I like it. but smooth had never been used for vodka. And in 1990, Absolut and Stolichnaya were taking the market by storm, and Smirnoff were looking for a premium version to compete with them. And that was a pretty tough ask, because at that time, Smirnoff was very much supermarket vodka, and these two were prestigious premium brands. So my thesis there was, to compete with them, we have to come up with a functional product difference. And we came up with the notion of the world's smoothest vodka. And you could taste Smirnoff blind against Absolut and Stolichnaya, and it was perceptibly smoother. It was a great achievement by the technical people at IDB at the time. The last one in this area was, it was about moving the goalposts, about changing the rules in the category. And at the time, this is the early 2000s, Grey Goose had created a new super tier in the vodka market. It was super premium. It came from France, which had never happened before. And it was very successful. So we were given a brief to come up with something that could compete with Grey Goose. And by then, Grey Goose had had 5 years of taking the high ground. So we had to find something which a salesman could say to a retailer, or an advertiser could say to a consumer, look, you have to try this. It's better than Grey Goose because. And the reason came from a visit to Tbilisi in what was formerly Soviet Georgia in 1997, about 5 years, 10 years earlier, where somebody said to me that in Georgia, they made vodka not from grain, but from grapes. And that stuck in my mind. And again, this is an example of inside the box. It was inside my head in this case. So what we did was you produced the world's first vodka made from grapes, not grain. It was called Ciroc. Excuse me, and it's been extremely successful, particularly in the US market. Okay, another idea, which is, I made the point earlier in respect of Baileys, that an idea is only as good as the person at the other side of the table says it is, the buyer. And this is something that you might find amusing. Baileys had now been, this was 1984, Baileys had been established for 10 years. It had become a kind of formal marketing academy for people in Ireland. Back in the 70s, when the brief was issued, it was a fairly old-fashioned drinks company, but now it was full of FMCG professionals working in the business. And Bewley's, which is shown here, was a very famous Dublin institution. It's called the Oriental Cafe, and anyone who visits Dublin will probably have a coffee or a meal at Bewley's. And Bewley's had the nerve to develop a coffee cream liqueur to go out and compete with Baileys. And the Baileys people were very up in arms about this and very excited. So they called an emergency meeting. We flew to Dublin to get a brief. And it was quite an exciting proposition. I got off the plane about 10 o'clock in the morning and just went to get a box of matches in the bar. And they were pulling a pint of Guinness. And Guinness is one of the most visually beautiful products there is. And I just looked at this, and it sort of started out like a giant Baileys and then separated out into this appetizing combination of black and white. And I took this in my head to the meeting, which was at a hotel next to the airport. And I said to the client at the meeting, which is going to be a briefing, would you mind if I had a pint of Guinness? And he said, well, we're not an old-fashioned company anymore. We don't drink during the day. But I said, please, I'd desperately like a pint of Guinness. So they sent one up from the bar. And I held it up in front of the client and said, how would you like a coffee cream liqueur where you drank the coffee, the dark bit, through the cream, the white bit. And he said, how are you going to do that? And I dug into my memory bank and found something that my father had in his house, when I was 10 years old. And then I saw it again in the reception of an office about 6 months earlier. And it was that. It was basically, it was two bottles joined together with two separate apertures. So making it up as I went along, I said, well, I could see two bottles, one with about 80% of the liquid and the other with 20%. The one with the 80% would have a large aperture so that the liquid would pour out quickly. The one with the 20% would have a very small aperture so that the liquid would pour out slowly and would settle on the top. I was making this up as I went along. I had no idea whether it would work or not, but he was extremely intrigued. And I think the result was a brand called Sheridan's, which always intrigues me, Sheridan's, because it's been around since 1990. I've never met anyone who's served it in their house. I've never seen anyone drink it in a public place. And yet in 1990, this is what happened. The idea took me about 30 seconds, I suppose. The presentation took 2 minutes. The client bought the idea in 60 seconds, which was utterly amazing. And in 2020, Sheridan sold 325,000 cases and turned over $98 million. Now, that brand has been making money for the company for 30 years. Maybe not that figure every single year, but it was an extraordinary, the whole procedure was extraordinary. And I think the real hero here was the man sitting on the other side of the table who said, yep, I think that idea could work, let's do it. So all the whiteboards and all the briefing material that they had available went by the wayside. Anyway, I have one more story and then we'll wrap up. This is going back to 1974 again. And in the UK, and I think French people would find this very hard to believe, a heavy wine drinker consumed 2 bottles of wine per month. 2 bottles of wine per month. It was extraordinary. But wine was relatively new to the UK at that time. And most of the wine sold in the UK was French. So if you walked into a liquor store in London, that's the kind of thing you would see. And if you look at that shelf, there's absolutely no communication to the consumer, to a non-French speaking consumer. The names would be very difficult to say. There's nothing that gives you any indication as to the quality of the product or the character of the product or anything else. So it was completely mystifying. And I mean, I remember people coming to my house with bottles of wine and saying, I've no idea what this is like, but I hope it's okay, thinking that I was a wine expert, which I most certainly was not. Anyway, that was the environment. And the brief to us was to develop a French wine brand for sale in the UK. And that was a great place to start. There were a couple of brands that were attempting to communicate to consumers. Blue Nun, for example. I think none of those French brands that we saw there, if you bought a bottle at the beginning of the month and threw the bottle away, liked it, at the end of the month, you probably would not remember what you had. Whereas Blue Nun, you could see it on the shelf, it communicated. French people may not like the wine, but there you go. And there were a few brands like that. There was Blue Nun, Black Tower, there was Matthias Rosé from Portugal. They, whether deliberately or inadvertently, were communicating with British consumers. So we looked, well, what did we learn from that? The bottle shape was different. The name was easy for people to remember and to say. And the company had bought a wine brand called Piat a few years earlier. Now, Piat has a great start. It's a 4-letter word. Excellent way to begin. it also had a very distinctive bottle shape. So it was easy to recognize and would be easy to remember. We didn't think the bottle looked special enough because wine was very much like cigarettes, I suppose. People in the UK would smoke Benson and Hedges on the weekend where they were showing off to their friends, but during the week they would have cheaper cigarettes. So we took that idea and applied it to Piat. We called it Le Piat d'Or. And it went within 2 years to becoming a leading brand in the UK market. So having established the brand, the next thing was we needed a product. And I did something that I probably shouldn't have done, but we figured it would be incredibly difficult to brief a French winemaker to make something that would appeal to the English palate. So I cheated. I got some Blue Nun, the actual wine itself, which was sweet German white wine. I bought some food coloring from a supermarket, which had no flavor, but color. I produced that, and that became the template. We took that product on the right, the red wine, to France and said to a French winemaker, I want you to develop a wine, a French red wine that tastes like that. There was little resistance. They did add grape must, which is sweetened grape juice, to achieve the effect, but that became the basis for the Piat d'Or product. So that really is my story. I want to go back to this box I've been talking about, the inside the box, because I think all the examples I've given you have come from inside my proverbial box rather than through any kind of lateral thinking or anything like that. And I'll give you the ingredients of what I think inside the box means. I think if you're in the new product business, it is a 168-hour-a-week obsession. As I said to you earlier, you have to keep your you have to be engaged with your problem all the time to be successful in this business. And I mean, I've spent quite a long time in the shower thinking about this presentation this morning. And I think every project that I've worked on has become an obsession of one kind or another. It also involves 360-degree vision. You have to look and you also have to listen to what people are saying. Anything that a single person might say could impact on the brand idea that you come up with. I remember once being stuck in a traffic jam behind a truck from Germany, and I found the brand name written on the back of the truck, and that was the name that we used. I think memory is incredibly important. If you look at the Sheridan's idea, there was the memory I had of this product that was in my father's drinks cabinet when I was 10 years old. I think you're going to be better at this business if you're good at, if you have a good memory. And if you don't, you have to write things down. You have to look around you and write things down. I think another thing is that the business of ideas is not a democracy. When people talk to me about sprints or brainstorming sessions, excuse me, where 8 people sit around drinking wine and coming up with ideas, it doesn't work. It never works. I've never seen a successful idea come out of a brainstorming session or a sprint. You get a lot of quantity, but absolutely no quality. I think ideas are often the product of one man's vision and another man's acceptance of that vision, or ladies as well. The other thing which Bailey's taught me, and which was incredibly important, I think, throughout my career, is you always have to aim to come up with a single answer. As soon as a designer walked into my office and put 12 different beautifully rendered, computer-generated designs down in front of me and said, which one do you think? I'd throw him out of the office because he's abdicating responsibility for making a particular recommendation. every one of the ideas that I've come up with that has worked has been based on only a single answer. I remember a client once saying to me, if you have more than one answer, you don't have any. Some more. Senior buy-in. Throughout my career, the only time I had success in getting ideas off the ground was by dealing with members of the top level of an organization. Middle management don't have the muscle to buy ideas, and it's incredibly difficult to sell through that channel. Wavelength, very important. You have to, I know Bailey's was an exception in this case, but you have to have a relationship with the person for whom you're working, almost so that you become interchangeable and the ideas aren't recognized as yours or theirs. The other thing is, I think we place far too much emphasis on what consumers say. I think consumers tend to like what they know, but they don't know what they might like. And listening to consumers telling you exactly what to do and how to develop a brand is going to get you nowhere. I think if you don't know more than your consumers, then you're dead. And in the same way that I think, having learnt over 60 years about market research, it's a very blunt instrument. It has far more authority than it deserves. And it's never going to either save you from failure or guarantee success. And lastly, I think you are going to fail. I've failed. Everyone's failed in this category. So the secret of failure is to make it quick and to make it cheap. So that, in effect, is my story. I wrote it up in a book. Oh, sorry. This is a quote which I think perfectly sums up what I was saying, but written by two academics called Farson and Keyes. And they said, the best ideas aren't hidden in shadowy recesses. They're right in front of us, hidden in plain sight. Innovation seldom depends on discovering obscure or subtle elements, but in seeing the obvious with fresh eyes. I thought that was a great quote. And I think it sort of sums up everything that I believe. Finally, I decided a few years back that I would write a book about my experiences. And I think if I designed the cover, it would have looked like that. It's called That Shit Will Never Sell. And the title comes from a remark made by an American on the first time he encountered Bailey's. He looked at it, tasted it, and turned to the CEO of the company and said, that shit will never sell. I thought it was a great title for a book. And fortunately, I got a good designer to design the cover for me. And he presented it like that. There's a website, www.thatshitwillneversell, where you can preview it and order it. And you can get in touch with me at david@tswns.net. Thank you very much for listening.
David, thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure to have you and for you to sort of talk us through your journey all those years. I know that people will probably have a lot of questions. I understand that, you know, some of the things you say might be a little bit controversial for some people, so there might be a nice, healthy debate coming along in a couple of seconds. So I would dare the audience to sort of come to the fourth, and if they disagree with some of the things that David says, please be free to tell us why. If you agree with what David says, again, come to the fourth, tell us why. So I'm just going to spare. I was going to ask a few questions, but I'm just going to spare the time for the kind people that joined us today. Andrew.
Hi, David. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It was a real pleasure. I would like to share some of my own, but that's probably for another venue. I work for a market research firm, and from what I've been hearing from your wisdom is that don't listen to what the consumer thinks about your idea. If it's a good one, stick with it and believe in it. Or do you feel research actually plays a major role in counteracting creative?
I thought research, I mean, I got to a stage eventually where I did my own research. And first of all, by doing it myself, I kept it brief. I never did more than 4 focus groups on anything. We did some research on Bailey's when it first came, when we first developed it, and the response was extremely negative. The men said it was a girl's drink, and they wouldn't be seen dead drinking it. The women said it reminded them of kaolin and morphine, which was a diarrhea remedy. So we put the findings in the briefcase, never showed it to the company, and we launched, and it was successful. So I don't think, in my experience, that market research can either underwrite success or indicate failure. I think there are too many variables involved in the development of brands for market research to play a useful role. Never did for me. Sorry about that.
David, we also have quite a few people defending brainstorming practices. So you seem to be a little bit against that. So what's your answer to that? Why would you not support the idea of brainstorming?
Because I think that with brainstorming, nobody really is forced to take ownership of an idea. You sit in a brainstorming, you're sipping away at a nice glass of Chablis. People are shouting, people are writing stuff up on the wall. It's never worked for me, never. I think in the dark hours of 3 a.m., when you're thinking, that's when ideas happen. And I remember reading something on LinkedIn about a guy. He said they took a team to Helsinki, and at the end of the week, they came up with 1,000 ideas. And I thought, what a complete waste of time and money that was. I think brainstorming's produce volume. Volume doesn't produce answers.
Whoa.
Never worked for me, and I don't think I've seen it work for anybody else.
That's an interesting line there. That's an interesting line. Do we have anyone in the audience who wants to come to the forth and debate that?
Take me on. I'm happy to.
Vanessa, please. Yes, I was waiting for you.
Hi, David. So
Hi.
I think for me, my experience of brainstorming, it's all about where you see it in the process. So I often come with clients who have one idea and they're really stuck in their river of thinking. So the brainstorming is a way just to expand them. But it's the beginning. Then you need to take the ideas, merge them, kill them. And sometimes you're surprised that the direction is different from what you think. So I agree with you. If you take brainstorming as your main source of a finalized idea, it's not. And the second thing is that, in many creative process, it's all about engaging people into your process. So the brainstorming function is also to get a team working together. If you show them something that you think is great, but they haven't been involved, they often don't like it. So that would be
that's a very good point. That's why I think that ideas only find their way into companies effectively through top management, because top management is not interested in the process of developing ideas. They're simply interested in when. So I never had a single, I've been to hundreds of brainstorms and I've never got a single thing out of any of them, not one. And this is 60 years of doing it. So I can only talk from experience, in the same way that my views on research, are based on a long, hard slog.
And Andrew, I can see you smiling. You're ready to say something.
Oh yeah, but I can easily bogart this entire conversation, which I'll come back to. Obviously, as an ideas guy, there's a certain point where you probably want to reflect on what your consumer is interested in. Right? So when you did the bottle for the the red wine from France that you used, the German wine, and then added food coloring, would you use research on that side for packaging? I mean, Hubbard's has a whole entire career out of it, so I would assume that you would also think that your consumers' input would also help identify what would sell.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, Andrew, about that I strongly disbelieve in. we never ever tested alternatives. Never. We never tested, put 6-pack designs in front of consumers and said, which one do you like best? You just paid out $250,000 for some hotshot design company to come up with a great design for your product. And now you're going to go out and talk to a whole lot of people who know absolutely nothing about design and ask them which one they like best. The one they like best is the one that is closest to their familiarity. I think this is a specialist a business. I mean, I spent 60 years doing it, so I should be reasonably good at it after a while. And the designers we used were all pretty good too.
Fantastic. Any other questions? I know Nicholas has been asking about the future of packaging, and he was thinking about biodegradable materials and smart labeling. I think, Nicholas, we will address those things in other sessions, in later sessions, where we're going to have people who specialize in sustainability and things like that to discuss materials. I think for today's purpose, let's focus more on the creative side of things, design and ideas generation, brand. Where do you get your names from? So I particularly loved the way that you came up with the different names, different brand names, David, and which shows you that process is good, but sometimes the answer is in front of us. It's under our nose, and it's very easy to miss the answer if we sort of submerge ourselves into processes and procedures and things like that. So there is a danger to sort of miss the answer if we're very preoccupied with setting up processes and procedures and participating in those. But I guess a balance of the two is probably a good idea. Like be in tune with your environment, but at the same time, as Vanessa says and as Andrew says, and I agree with them, I have to say, that you kind of need to consult the consumer at some point and just get the pulse of the market and understand how they feel and how they behave. So maybe like a good balance of the two it would be my conclusion, at least.
I wrote a piece on LinkedIn a year or so ago, and it was called Sour Cola. And I think this is the point for you, Andrew, if you like, and that is that if I were developing a brand to compete with Coke, I would try and borrow as many of Coke's characteristics as possible, but then I would turn everything on their heads and make it totally different. So I would take the notion of sour cola and say, okay, maybe 5% of Coke drinkers will buy that idea, will like that idea. But that's $1 billion market, 5% of Coke. So, but I don't think research can measure that. I think this is something that you have to do and then put out into the market and see, how it works out. You can't write a prediction on a 6%. A brand that gets 95% in the bottom box is not a formula for encouragement.
Yeah. Amazing. Do we? Oh yes, Sue, please.
Yes, I would like to discuss about the last point. Just now, David sharing. You will first so make it quick and cheap. Means is that we have to make something quick and also cheap. Does it mean this way?
I don't think it means that. I mean, I was involved. I didn't develop the idea, but in the 70s, Guinness brought out a brand called Guinness Light. And Guinness Light spent over £1 million, and that's in the 1970s. So it was worth a huge amount of money, doing research to prove that the idea would work, and it didn't. So that's what I mean, slow and expensive. Quick and cheap is you should not spend too much money evaluating a brand before you decide to kill it. You are going to fail, but don't spend too much money failing. People often spend fortunes failing, which is crazy.
Okay, so you mean also the time, spending the time also within the short period of time should come up something.
Well, time costs. time is what costs you money.
Mhm.
You know, you've got people working on the clock, you're spending money on research, you're looking at different pack designs, you're
Mhm.
testing different products and everything else. I think people who've been in a business for a couple of years should know enough about the business to be able to determine the difference between what's right and what's wrong. And I think
Okay.
I think that's important. So therefore, you should be able to make decisions.
Mhm. Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Thank you,
Pleasure.
Sue. Do we have any other questions for David or for Ben about
Kia,
harvest?
any challenges?
No, I must say I'm a strong advocate of spending as little money as possible on research and using people's knowledge, expertise, and insight to get on and get the job done. It's always easy to blame failure on agencies or what the consumer didn't say or did say versus the intuition and soul of the people that are working in the business. So I think we're missing that a lot, I think, today. And we're abdicating quite a lot of that responsibility.
Well, there's a story in my book about a brand called Aqua Libra, which we developed in the 80s. And the client was the global head of marketing for the company. So he was a pretty senior guy. And I developed the idea and took it to him. And we were both very much in tune with what we were trying to do. And I sold it to him off the back of a cigarette packet in 2 minutes. And he said, that's fantastic. That's exactly what we're looking for. And then I said, well, there's no point in doing any research on this because nobody will understand it, or only a very few people will understand it. So we launched it anyway. And it went to 1 million cases in 3 years. It was a good idea.
I think the other point, David, that you make, which I think is something from a brand development point of view that's really, really important, is a sort of endless curiosity around your brand and your product. Okay, and having just bought a cat and having a young kitten in the house. And seeing that curiosity really does kill the cat, okay? But in a positive sense, for me, that is a real sort of good image of how I would see brand developers just going at their brands from every angle and really exploring every nook and cranny there is to explore, because that's how you learn. Yeah?
Absolutely. I think I was incredibly lucky because you need about 4 or 5 years to get reasonably good at what you're doing. I think Bailey's came out 4 years after I'd started. And I think it's important that people spend a lot of time in the business of developing brands. So, you know, you need time to get good at it.
Courtney.
Hello, thank you. Thank you, Hubbers, for everything. And David, great talk. It was very insightful. It actually, got those 3 a.m. thoughts kind of churning in my brain. But I did want to ask and kind of step back. I agree that if you're going to fail, you should fail quickly. But I've also learned in marketing that I need to be patient with some of the things I put out, because sometimes people need to see me 5 or 7 times before they're willing to engage with me. But David, I wanted to ask your opinion on, how do you balance the know to fail quickly, but also as a marketer, be patient? How do you balance that?
Well, I think my point about failing quickly and cheaply is don't get engaged in things like testing 5 different variants of everything, which is what people do. And that's what costs a huge amount of money. If you cut back on your research spend, we never did more than 4 focus groups on anything. Never, ever. Because after you've done 2, the returns begin to diminish. It's just saving money on the upfront expenditure on covering your butt.
Okay, no, understood, and that makes total sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sure.
I have a question, if possible.
Yeah, sure.
Just 1 minute, Ed. 1 minute, because there's another person who raised his hand. Yeah, you'll be after. You'll be after Sage.
Well, sure, no problem.
Hello, David.
Hi.
Your story was very insightful and inspiring, but I had a question about ideas. Before Corona, before this COVID pandemic happened, we were engaging with people and we used to talk and we used to think on different things and we used to get ideas. But now what has happened is we had a sort of disconnect with people. We are engaging online, but still it has created a mental block. So how do you get rid of that and means still get good ideas?
I don't think it's any different. I mean, you just have to use your own judgment more and going out and talking to consumers for them to tell you what to do. Where are you, by the way?
Well, I'm from India and I'm an engineering student, mechanical engineering student.
Okay. Because I worked in India for a couple of years.
Yes.
And I loved it. I think, I don't think I've had ideas that I'm looking at the moment with people, and being stuck indoors with COVID hasn't affected the process in any way. I mean,
Yeah,
I think there are opportunities that come up with COVID, but that's another story.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
Pleasure.
Ed.
Thanks very much, David. Very insightful. So I'm in the process. Everything you've discussed is very much about building a brand on a product more so. I'm trying to build a brand for a company. How much do the two differ?
What do you? I don't understand. If you tell me what you're actually doing.
I'm trying to build my brand is a company. We're a reseller of electric bikes and electric scooters, which is a very up and coming market sector within the UK, as you can probably see with the influx of cycle lanes everywhere. So I'm trying to build a national brand, a company. We don't have our own products, we're resellers. So my brand is the company. How similar or dissimilar is it building a company brand to a product?
I think it's exactly the same, really. There's no difference. The company represents values. And I was thinking of the famous campaign in the 60s for Avis car hire. They came in, the Hertz was the #1 brand, and Avis came in and said, we're second, we'd try harder. And they actually took that philosophy through to what they were doing and, actually delivered it to consumers. And I think with a company, you could have safety as part of your offering. You could have your bikes are more stylish than anybody else's. There are a load of different opportunities for creating an identity for a company, and then all the products could be made to fit that identity.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, if you get my book, give me a call and I'll help you in any way I can. I'm always.
I've already emailed you, so I look forward to talking.
Yeah, no, I'd be delighted to talk.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
You know a good business when you see one.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Ed. Helping people.
Thank you, Ed. Anybody else who would like to note something or ask a question or challenge? No, I think it was a good session. So a big thank you to everybody who attended and who stayed for a bit longer for this conversation, for the debate, let's call it that.
I just wanted to ask Benjamin a question, if I could, about have you ever heard of Piat d'Or, the wine?
It's a good question, David. You have to admit that I never heard about it. Look in my favorite wine list, but I heard about.
The advertising used to say the French adore le Piat d'Or, but I never ever met a Frenchman who'd even heard of it, let alone adored it, but it was a very famous ad campaign.
But it came up with a great idea. Congratulations. we were thinking, guys, to have maybe a small breakout rooms. So do you think you want to do that? Because we exceed a bit the time, but if you want to be able to have more time to discuss on with a few attendees.
I'm going to need to shoot, so I'd like to say thank you to everyone, and I look forward to the next one.
Cheers, Ed. Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
to have you. Good to have you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers, Ed. Nice to meet you.
You too.
So maybe Sturgis, we keep that for the next time, because I think everybody has been already very patient, and I think very inspired by David. And I want, on behalf of all our community, David, to give you a big thank you. And if we were in front of you, we will give you a big round of applause, but I'm sure the intention is here for sure. So
Well, thank you very much for your kind words.
Thanks, David. That was
Thanks,
fantastic.
everyone.
Oh, brilliant.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys,
David.
for joining us, and hope to see you soon for
Yeah.
the next talk.
Anytime. Okay, take care.
Thank you. Thank you,
Bye,
David.
everyone.
Bye.
Cheers.
Have a
Bye.
great weeks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, guys. That was great. I really appreciate it.
Alexandria, thanks for the participation. We appreciate it.
We'll talk later, Andrew. I got your LinkedIn.
Awesome. Talk to you guys soon. Ciao.
Cheers.
Thanks. Bye. Bye.